Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. We've all heard the saying, in time heals all wounds. But what happens when time moves forward and your heart stays stuck in the past? When someone you once loved no longer stands beside you, yet somehow still lives rent-free in your mind? Getting over someone isn't just about deleting their number or avoiding their social media. It's a mental and emotional process, one that's as complex as it is personal. One of the most painful and complicated aspects of getting over someone is confronting the truth about who they really were and what the relationship actually was. When someone we love is no longer part of our lives, our minds tend to cling to the parts that made us feel good. We remember the laughter, the sweet messages, the small thoughtful gestures. We hold on to the moments when we felt seen, valued, or loved. But often, we remember selectively. We recall the highlight reel, not the full story. We romanticize them, making them larger than life, turning flawed humans into emotionally perfect illusions. This idealization is often what keeps us stuck. Not the actual person, but the image of them we've created and now mourn. Letting go becomes harder because we aren't just releasing someone who left, we're also detaching from a fantasy. It's not always the person we miss, but the version of them we constructed in our minds. This version is usually shaped by hope, longing, and unmet needs. Maybe they made us feel like we finally mattered, like someone understood us without judgment. Maybe they were there at a time when we felt lost, and they became a lighthouse. But in our attempt to preserve those feelings, we freeze them in our memory, often ignoring or minimizing the ways the relationship was unbalanced, painful, or simply not right. This dissonance between fantasy and reality creates emotional resistance to moving on. Deep down, we know things weren't perfect. We know there were flaws, maybe even red flags. But the mind can be both a guardian and a trickster. It protects us from pain by amplifying the pleasure, by editing the bad scenes and playing the good ones on loop. It's like mourning a movie we loved, even though we knew it had a sad ending all along. We grieve not only the person but the potential of what we wanted it to be. That potential can haunt us far more than the person themselves. Acceptance begins with honesty. It's sitting down with your memories and asking, what was real? What was I hoping for? What am I still holding on to? It's recognizing that even if they once made you feel special, they also made you feel confused, neglected, hurt, or uncertain. It's allowing yourself to look beyond the Instagram-worthy moments and see the late-night tears, the unanswered texts, the emotional distance, the times you had to convince yourself that things would get better when deep down you knew they wouldn't. Acceptance is not a sudden switch. It's a quiet unfolding. It's the process of looking at the person and the relationship without rose-colored glasses. It's understanding that they were not your savior or your soulmate just because it felt magical at times. Chemistry can exist with someone who is wrong for you. Deep feelings can form with someone who cannot love you the way you deserve. Connection doesn't always mean compatibility. And someone being important to your story doesn't mean they belong in your future. The hardest part of this acceptance is facing our own role in the illusion. Sometimes we don't just miss them, we miss who we were when we were with them. We miss the version of ourselves that felt worthy because someone else's attention gave us validation. We miss the comfort of being wanted, even if it was inconsistent. In letting go of the fantasy, we also let go of parts of ourselves that were defined by that connection. That's scary. But it's also liberating. When you stop clinging to the fantasy, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop waiting for closure from them because you give it to yourself. You stop replaying what-ifs because you recognize that no imagined future can change the reality of what happened. You stop idolizing someone who walked away or who never truly showed up. You begin to see that healing isn't betrayal to the love you once felt, it's a tribute to the lessons it taught you. It's important to understand that accepting reality doesn't mean erasing every good memory or labeling the relationship as a mistake. Not all endings are failures. Some people come into our lives to teach us how to love, how to hurt, how to grow. Acceptance allows you to say, it mattered, it changed me. But it's not meant to be part of my life anymore. That's not bitterness, that's maturity, that's courage. As long as we hold on to a fantasy, we stay emotionally unavailable to ourselves and others. We compare real people to the idealized version in our minds. We measure new possibilities against a ghost, and in doing so, we rob ourselves of authentic connection. When you let go of the fantasy, you allow room for reality, a reality where you are enough without needing someone else to make you feel that way, a reality where someone can love you as you are, not because you fit a fantasy, but because you are real too. You deserve peace. You deserve a mind that isn't trapped in a loop of what could have been. And peace only comes when you release the illusion. So ask yourself today, am I in love with them, or am I in love with the idea of them? Am I remembering the truth or only the parts that comfort me? What am I avoiding by holding on to someone who's already gone? Acceptance is not giving up. It's giving in to the truth, to the process, and ultimately to your own healing. And when you truly accept the reality, not the fantasy, you'll find that the weight you've been carrying slowly begins to lift. You'll breathe easier, sleep better, and begin to see a future that isn't defined by what you lost, but by what you've learned. And that, in the end, is the first and most powerful step toward moving on. When someone has taken up residence in your thoughts, creating distance may feel like both a relief and a betrayal. On one hand, your heart aches for space to heal. On the other, there's a strange comfort in their lingering presence, even if it hurts. Emotional attachments don't end the moment a relationship does. In many ways, the most difficult part begins afterward, when the silence between you is loud and your mind keeps replaying the past. That's why creating distance isn't just an action, it's an intentional act of self-respect. We often underestimate how much the people we're trying to move on from remain present in our lives, not physically, but digitally and emotionally. We see their photos, updates, and stories. We reread old messages, scroll through memories, and sometimes out of habit or hope, we check in on their lives, even if we're no longer part of them. Every time we do this, we reinforce the emotional tie that keeps them alive in our minds. It's like reopening a wound that's trying to scar. Healing can't happen when we keep scratching the surface. Creating distance doesn't mean we're acting out of bitterness or hate. It means we're drawing a line between what once was and what now needs to be. It's choosing to protect your mental peace instead of staying tangled in a past that no longer serves your growth. And while it might feel cold to unfollow, mute, block, or delete, sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to remove the triggers that keep pulling you backward. It's important to acknowledge that distance doesn't only apply to physical or digital separation. Emotional distance is just as crucial. Even if you've stopped all contact, the conversations may still continue in your head. Arguments, apologies, fantasies of reunions, imagined scenarios of closure. This emotional loop can be exhausting. It keeps you emotionally engaged with someone who is no longer reciprocating. Creating distance means breaking that loop, not by suppressing the thoughts, but by recognizing them and gently choosing not to dwell in them. You notice the memory, acknowledge it, and let it pass, rather than invite it in for a full conversation. Part of this emotional distancing involves setting boundaries within yourself. If you catch yourself stalking their social media, remind yourself what you're really looking for. Validation, a sign they miss you, evidence they've moved on. Whatever it is, remember that it doesn't change your healing process. Their life, whether happy or struggling, is no longer your business. And your healing doesn't depend on their silence or attention. It depends on your willingness to step out of the cycle. It can be helpful to shift your environment too. Sometimes we associate people with certain places, songs, routines, or even scents. Revisiting the coffee shop you used to go to together or listening to a playlist you made during the relationship can trigger waves of nostalgia and sadness. While you don't need to erase every part of your history, giving yourself permission to create new associations can help rewire your emotional landscape. Go to a new cafe, start a new playlist, redecorate your room, reclaim your space. People often say, "But I don't want to be rude," or "I want to stay friends." While staying friends may work, in rare cases, in most situations, it's a way of keeping a connection alive that your heart isn't ready to handle yet. You can respect someone and still choose not to keep them in your immediate circle. You can wish them well and still walk away. Friendships with exes, or people we still have feelings for, require deep emotional detachment, which usually doesn't exist right after a separation. If it hurts to see them, talk to them, or think about them, then friendship isn't kindness, it's self-sabotage. Another common fear is the guilt that comes with distance. We fear we're being cold or immature. But maturity isn't about pretending you're okay when you're not. It's about doing what's necessary to take care of your emotional health. Would you keep holding a burning object because you're worried about how others perceive you if you dropped it? No. You'd put it down to avoid getting burned again. The same logic applies here. If a connection is causing you pain, it's okay to release it, even if it once brought you joy. Creating distance also gives you clarity. When you're too close to someone emotionally, it's hard to see the situation for what it truly was. Time apart gives you a clearer view, not just of them, but of yourself. It helps you understand what you truly need, what you're willing to tolerate, and what kind of love you're looking for in the future. Space allows healing to settle in where confusion once reigned. Of course, creating distance isn't a magic switch. It doesn't mean you'll stop missing them overnight. It doesn't mean your mind won't drift to them during quiet moments. What it means is that you're no longer feeding the connection that keeps you stuck. You're no longer prioritizing their presence over your peace. And day by day, the distance begins to make a difference. The thoughts come less frequently, the pain loses its sharp edge. You start to focus on your own life, your own joy, your own path. This kind of distance isn't running away. It's running toward yourself. It's choosing to invest in your well-being rather than chase closure from someone who may never provide it. It's honoring your pain by giving it the space to heal, instead of crowding it with false hope or unnecessary reminders. In the end, healing isn't about pretending you never cared. It's about caring for yourself enough to step back. It's about honoring the love you once gave by redirecting it inward. And maybe one day, you'll think of that person with peace, not longing, with gratitude, not grief. But for now, if they still live in your mind, the kindest thing you can do is show them the door and close it gently but firmly so you can finally begin to move on. After a breakup or emotional detachment from someone who meant the world to you, your mind becomes a maze. You walk through memories, trip over regrets, and run in circles around questions that have no answers. In this space, it's easy to forget who you are. It's easy to let your identity become entangled with someone else's absence. They lived in your thoughts for so long that the silence they left behind feels unbearable. You miss them, but more than that, you miss the version of yourself who felt whole when they were around. This is where the real healing begins. Not in holding on, not in waiting for closure, but in turning the focus inward. When someone still lives in your mind, the most powerful thing you can do is start investing in the one person who truly matters now, yourself. Shifting focus to yourself is not selfish, it's survival. It's a return to center after being emotionally displaced. It's not about pretending the pain isn't there or faking strength. It's about choosing every single day to prioritize your healing over your hurting. To take steps, small or significant, that lead you back to a place where your identity is not defined by who you lost, but by who you are becoming. In the wake of heartbreak, people often search for distractions, parties, dates, endless scrolling, impulsive changes, anything to dull the ache. But distractions are temporary. They keep you moving but not progressing. What truly helps you move forward is intentional attention. Attention to your needs, your interests, your growth. Attention to the neglected corners of yourself that may have been dimmed during the relationship. The truth is, when we are deeply connected to someone, we often compromise parts of ourselves, sometimes knowingly, often without realizing it. We shift priorities, quiet passions, and sometimes even shrink just to keep a connection alive. When that connection ends, what's left is the chance to rebuild those parts, brighter, bolder, and more authentically than ever before. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean avoiding emotion, it means creating space to process it in a way that doesn't consume you. Cry when you need to, feel the weight of the loss, but also let those tears water new beginnings. Don't just mourn the ending, celebrate the freedom it creates. Freedom to rediscover who you are when you're not attached to someone else's idea of you. Freedom to rebuild your confidence not through someone else's gaze, but through your own reflection. One of the most transformative acts of self-focus is curiosity. Curiosity about what lights you up. Maybe you used to write, paint, dance, or run. Maybe there's a skill you always wanted to learn or a place you dreamed of visiting. These aren't just hobbies, they're lifelines. They are ways of reconnecting with your own joy. They remind you that fulfillment can come from within, not just from romantic validation. Start small if you have to. Read for 10 minutes a day. Go for a walk without music and just listen to your thoughts. Take a class that challenges you. Volunteer. These aren't distractions. They are doorways to parts of yourself you may have forgotten. You'll find that when you shift your attention inward, the person who once lived in your mind begins to fade. Not because they weren't significant, but because your own presence becomes louder, more grounded, more captivating. When you begin showing up for yourself, taking care of your body, nurturing your spirit, setting goals, forgiving yourself for your mistakes, you start becoming someone you are proud of. You stop needing their memory to feel whole. You stop waiting for someone else to rescue you from your emptiness because you realize you're not empty, you were just emotionally crowded. This shift also brings clarity. You start to see the relationship differently, not through the haze of longing, but through the lens of growth. You begin to understand what you need in love, what you're willing to compromise, and what you won't accept again. This doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from reflection. Real self-focus leads to emotional maturity. You stop blaming them entirely, but you also stop blaming yourself. You start to understand that two people can care about each other and still not be right for each other. You begin to let go of the narrative that it was your job to fix it, to be more, to hold it together. You recognize your value doesn't diminish because someone couldn't see it clearly. Another powerful element of self-focus is learning to be alone. Not lonely, but alone in a way that empowers you. Being alone gives you the chance to recalibrate your emotional compass. It teaches you that your company can be enough, that peace can be found in solitude, that silence isn't something to fear, it's something to cherish, because in silence you hear your own voice again. You remember your dreams, your goals, your humor, your resilience. You stop being a supporting character in someone else's life and start being the main character in your own. And yes, there will be setbacks, days where you spiral back into their memory, nights when the silence feels unbearable again. That's part of healing. You're allowed to miss them and still choose yourself. You're allowed to remember and still move forward. Don't judge your progress by how often you think about them. Judge it by how often you return to yourself afterward. Progress isn't always a straight line. It's a daily decision. A recommitment to growth, even when grief is heavy. One of the most beautiful outcomes of self-focus is the confidence it builds. Not the superficial kind built on attention or appearance, but the kind that grows from doing the work, from showing up for yourself when it would be easier to give up, from making choices that honor your worth, your needs, and your future. This confidence becomes your new foundation. It becomes the quiet assurance that you are capable of healing, of loving again, of being loved in return, but this time from a place of wholeness, not dependence. As you continue to shift the focus to yourself, something magical happens. You stop seeing your healing as a response to heartbreak and start seeing it as a transformation. You begin to feel gratitude, not necessarily for the pain, but for what it revealed. You start to understand that getting over someone isn't just about letting them go. It's about finding yourself in the process. It's about rising from the loss with a deeper connection to who you are and who you're becoming. In this space of self-devotion, you may discover that the person who once lived in your mind no longer has the same power over you. Their memory might still visit from time to time, but it no longer dictates your mood or your worth. They become part of your story, not the author of it. And you, with all your newfound strength and self-awareness, start writing new chapters, ones that are not about who left, but about who stayed. You did. You stayed. You endured. You grew. That is the beauty of focusing on yourself. It doesn't erase the past, but it reclaims your future. It doesn't mean you stop loving others, but that you start loving yourself in a way that refuses to settle for anything less than what you deserve. So if someone still lives in your mind, don't fight the thought, outgrow it. Outgrow the pain, outgrow the longing, outgrow the version of yourself that needed them to feel complete. Because you are whole, you always were, you just forgot. And now, with every act of self-care, self-trust, and self-love, you are remembering again. When someone has left a deep imprint on your heart and mind, the world you once knew feels altered. It's not just that they're gone from your life, it's that everything reminds you of them. A favorite song comes on, and suddenly you're back in their passenger seat laughing over nothing. You pass a place you used to visit, and the memory hits so sharply it's hard to breathe. Even certain words, scents, or times of day become emotional landmines. This is what it means to have someone still living in your mind. And one of the most profound steps toward healing is to begin building a new emotional landscape, an inner and outer world that is no longer haunted by their absence, but shaped by your rebirth. When a relationship ends, whether through breakup, betrayal, drifting apart, or unreciprocated love, it's not only the person we lose. We also lose the shared dreams, the rituals, the small routines, the comfort of familiarity. And that loss lingers not just in our hearts, but in the spaces around us. The emotional landscape we once lived in gets frozen. It's like walking through a house where all the furniture is covered in dust sheets, intact but untouched. It takes intention, courage, and creativity to clear that space and make it livable again, to make it yours. You may not realize it right away, but after someone leaves, a part of you goes into emotional autopilot. You may function, go to work, run errands, smile when necessary, but internally, you're paused. The music stops, the colors fade, and your thoughts begin looping in reverse. You revisit the moments that felt beautiful, painful, unfinished. And while reflection is an essential part of healing, staying in that state too long can keep you emotionally stagnant. If you're not careful, your mind becomes a museum of what was instead of a canvas for what could be. This is why rebuilding your emotional landscape is so vital. It's not about pretending you were never hurt. It's not about denying that they mattered. It's about deciding that you deserve to live in a space, internally and externally, that is not dictated by your past. You deserve a life that reflects the person you are becoming, not the person you were when they were still in your world. One way to begin this process is by becoming aware of the emotional triggers that tie you to them. Take inventory of your day. What moments bring them to the surface? What patterns or habits keep you mentally anchored in the past? This might be something as simple as checking their social media first thing in the morning, revisiting old messages, or listening to a playlist that pulls you into nostalgia. It might even be more subtle, like sitting in the same spot on the couch where you used to talk, or repeating phrases they once said. By identifying these emotional echoes, you give yourself the power to change the script. This doesn't mean you need to erase everything associated with them, but rather repurpose it. That playlist? Add new songs. Ones that reflect your current mood, your dreams, your new identity. That route you used to walk with them? Take it again, but this time with a friend or while listening to a podcast that inspires you. Those places you used to frequent together? Go there alone, reclaim them. Turn them into symbols of your strength rather than reminders of your sorrow. Rebuilding also requires injecting novelty into your life. Newness is powerful medicine for emotional grief. It disrupts routine and stimulates parts of your brain that have been dormant during heartbreak. Try a new hobby, take up a creative outlet, or travel somewhere unfamiliar, even if it's just a nearby town. When you expose yourself to new environments, you begin to form new associations and memories. Your brain stops cycling through old memories on loop because it has fresh experiences to anchor itself to. But perhaps the most profound rebuilding happens within. This is where emotional architecture truly takes place. Think of yourself as designing a new inner home, one where your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs support your growth. Ask yourself, what kind of emotional environment do I want to live in? One that is spacious, peaceful, compassionate. Then begin to make decisions that align with that. Speak to yourself gently. Be patient with your healing. Let go of narratives that keep you stuck in pain. like an I'll never love again or no one will understand me like they did. These are emotional walls that close you in. You are allowed to build windows instead, to let in light, to let out stale air, to breathe again. This inner rebuilding is deeply influenced by the people you surround yourself with. Sometimes we unknowingly maintain emotional stasis by talking only to those who validate our pain but don't challenge us to move beyond it. While it's important to be seen and understood, it's also important to be gently pushed toward growth. Seek out those who remind you of your worth, not your wounds. People who talk about ideas, creativity, wellness, and possibilities, not just heartbreak, gossip, or drama. Your emotional landscape thrives in good company. Choose that company intentionally. As you continue to rebuild, you may encounter emotional ghosts, moments when their memory appears uninvited, or dreams where they show up smiling. Don't punish yourself for this. Healing is not linear, it's layered. Those memories are not signs that you failed. They are signs that you are still human, still processing, still letting go. But each time you wake up and choose to return to your life, your goals, your self-respect, you lay another brick in the foundation of your new world. An important piece of this process is forgiveness. Not just forgiving them for whatever role they played in your pain, but forgiving yourself for staying too long, for ignoring red flags, for losing parts of yourself in the process. You did what you could with what you knew at the time. Now you know more. Now you're building differently. And with that forgiveness comes freedom. Emotional space is cleared. The dust begins to settle. You start decorating this new inner landscape, not with the colors of loss, but with the hues of rediscovery. Eventually, the day will come when you notice something has changed. The song that once hurt now just plays. The memory that once ached now fades softly. The person who once lived in your mind now appears less and less, until one day they are merely a visitor, not a resident. And you'll be living fully again, maybe even more fully than before, because you didn't just move on, you rebuilt, you reimagined your emotional world. And now, it's not a monument to someone who left, it's a testament to the one who stayed, you. This rebuilding isn't quick and it isn't easy, but it is worth it. Every small decision, to care for yourself, to speak kindly to your heart, to try again, is a stone in the path toward peace. You'll look back one day and realize that the person you were when the pain first hit would barely recognize the strength you've now cultivated. You'll see that the love you were so desperate to receive was inside you all along, waiting patiently to be reclaimed. So if someone still lives in your mind, don't fight it with force, transform it with grace. Build a life so rich, so full, so authentic, that there is no longer any room for anyone who does not belong in it. Let your mind become a garden, not a grave. Fill it with beauty, not bitterness. Fill it with hope, not haunting. Fill it with the version of you that is no longer waiting to be saved, but is saving herself every single day. This is how you heal. This is how you reclaim your mind. This is how you begin again.